I'm getting started on my new miter saw station, and I'll be making the majority of that out of 3/4 inch plywood. I've got my saw board out here to make the cuts. Normally what I do is I make rough cuts with this, and then I recut the pieces on the table saw just to be 100% accurate. But since this is just a shop project, and I know I can be really accurate with this anyway, I'm going to go ahead and use this for all of the basic cuts on all the sheets. First ones I need are the side panels for the base units, and there's 4 of those, so I'll need to cut 2 sheets of plywood. Lean this one up against the wall for now. And then cut this one into smaller pieces. I've got a shorter saw board, but I can't seem to find it anywhere. It might be in my shed, but this one will work just as well. These panels are 26 inches wide and will be 40 inches tall for mine. I want the cutting surface for the saw higher than standard, so I'm going with 40 inches. It's always a really good idea to check the sheet to make sure it's square, because I had a couple of sheets in the past that weren't square right from the store, and it kind of really screws you up because you expect them to be square. So I always check now. I've got all the base side panels cut. There are 4 of those. Now from the pieces that I cut off the other side of the sheet, I want to cut the top upper side panels from these ones. I'll get 3 out of this one. First thing I need to do is rip it to the width. I'm ready to start putting it together, so the first thing I did was I took a level and I put it on the floor here to see how close this is to level. If it's sloping too badly, I would have to either shim up the cabinet somewhat or add feet, adjustable feet to it, or I could actually cut the panels so that it'll be scribed to the floor. But in my case, the floor is looking pretty good here. I don't think I'll have to do anything with it. Nearly everything is put together with glue, and I've got some 2-inch ibuildit dovetails here that I'm going to drive in. I've already drilled a pilot hole here to get started. I did that before I put the glue on to keep it from sliding around. Let's try to screw in until it comes up flush. Now I didn't bother to drill a countersink here because these screws will pull in tight and flush with the wood anyway. And drive it in. What I try to do with all of my builds is to keep them as simple as I possibly can. And that means to avoid things like rabbits or dados when they're not strictly necessary. For a shop cabinet like this, there's no compromise in strength or quality if you use a butt joint like this that's screwed together. You can always countersink the screw and then put a plug in afterwards if you want to dress it up. But here in my shop, I don't mind seeing the occasional screw every once in a while. It is, after all, just a workshop. And along with that, there will be other cabinets beside this one that will actually cover up most of what you're seeing here. Back when I changed my other chop saw cabinet to have the grinder beside it, I lifted it up to 41 inches tall, and I really like that height for cutting now. I don't think I can get used to it being down this low anymore, so I'm making mine that height as well. The plans that I'm going to be making for this at some point will have a standard height though, and you can always change it by changing, I think it's 5 components that have to be longer to whatever height you want to. Okay, well that's the first one of these put together. The other one is exactly the same. Open on the front like this. My first design for this, I actually had drawers in these areas. I since revised that to make these areas so that you can put tools in here to pull out on carts. I'm going to put the planer, my surface planer in one, and in the other one I'm not sure yet. But of course these could also be used for drawers if you would like. All you need to do is put a toe kick across the bottom to keep it steady that way and just put the drawers in. Just going to put this one over here out of the way until I get the other one put together. I've got the other one put together and I've got them set up roughly where they're supposed to go. And I put my level on to check again, and they're good and level this way, although the slab, the floor slab, slopes downhill a little bit on this side, so it's lower at the back. Not really a big problem, but I was thinking about it and I thought of a pretty neat way to level these up without, having to do too much. And that's to add these, just gotta flip this over, blocks to the bottom. These are just pieces of softwood, and they'll be what you could call permanent shims. What I'll be able to do with them though is plane them down to fit. Before I do any leveling, I've put these exactly where they're gonna go, 46 inches apart in my case. I've taken my level and put across between the two, and I can see that this one's higher than that one by a very small amount, so I'll work on this one first. So what I've got here is a shim, and I can see I'm low at the back here. I'll just put the shim in until it looks good. And then I can mark the front foot, which needs to be planed down so it'll sit flat, with my pencil. I'm doing the same thing on the other side, except it's very close, and I'll hold my pencil up to match that down there. I flipped the unit upside down again so I can plane the feet down to the marks I already made. I finished planing it, flipped it over back into the place it's supposed to be. I check with the level to see how it looks, and it looks pretty good. Dead on actually. So this one's good. Now I need to level over to the other one and fix that one. Same deal with this one, shim it up until it's level and then plane down the feet. And now I have it perfectly level across the top. And that's really what you want, because everything else goes off of this. So you really want to make sure that this is good. I brought over the parts for one of the uppers, and the first thing I want to do is take my filler, which goes across the bottom like that, and make a line across on the side panel. I'll take the other side panel and do the same thing. Just flip it over, try to get the best side out, although it really doesn't matter too much. And then I can start putting it together. Once again, these are all just glued butt joints put together with some screws. I'm using 2-inch screws for strength. They're a lot stronger than 1.5-inch screws into end grain, I've found anyway. Got that filler piece clamped down just so it won't move. I should mention that if you in general don't have a problem with the butt joint, but you don't like the exposed screws coming through, you could always use pocket screws from the other side, and that way you wouldn't see them. I like the screws going through the ibuildit dovetails because they're stronger and they're a lot faster and easier. You don't need no jig messing around to do it. And And when they go in nice and flush like that, they look pretty good. Okay, that's the first one of those assembled. I'll put it over here. This gets attached to the base unit. It's got to drill a pilot hole up through to join the base to the upper. And then drive in a 2-inch screw. And I'm just going to turn it around so I can drive screws in from behind. There's 4 screws, 2 in the front and 2 in the back here, will hold the upper to the base. I'm not using any glue on here, just in case I want to take this apart at some point. Okay, I'm just going to move this back where it goes. And I can plug the cord back in to the outlet back here. So as you can see, I've already got the vacuum put in here. And I made a separate video on doing that. The link is in the description if you're interested in watching that. But the next step is to build the stuff that goes in between the 2 base cabinets. And I'm starting with the toe kick on the front down here. I've got a block clamped on here that's 2.5 inches wide, just to hold the toe kick up against it. I've also got a shim put under here to lift it up because of the feet that I put on there to scribe it to the floor. And now I'm going to drive 2-inch screws from behind inside the cabinet to hold it in place. I'm not using any glue on this joint at all. And I'm doing the same thing over here. I've already drilled the pilot holes, just need to drive the screws. Same thing for the back toe kick. I'm just going to drive screws from the inside. It's spaced away from the back of the cabinet by the same amount, 2.5 inches. Now that I have those 2 toe kicks in place, I get the spreaders put on. They're 4 inches wide and go across here like this. And basically what they do is they replace a full shelf. There's one at the front and one at the back. You could, however, make it a full shelf if you wanted to. This is to save material because there'll be drawers above this here of mine, so I don't want to waste plywood in there for no reason. Now this goes on, then I'll screw it down to the toe kick, and then I'll screw it in also from inside the base cabinets. I've got the base in this area done. I got to put this divider in place. There's a couple of different ways to do this. One is to screw up from underneath, which is difficult. I'd have to move the thing out and tip it over. Another way is to use pocket screws down into the stretchers. The way that I'm going to do it is just use biscuits to spline the bottom of the panel to these with glue. No actual screws. So I've got marks made here. I've got the fence taken off my biscuit joiner. I've got a fence set up to go against. I just got to cut the slot in the bottom first, and then I'll cut it in the panel to match. Yeah, lots of guys don't like biscuit joiners, think they're useless, but I'll tell you, there are lots of situations where they really come in handy in the shop. It's in my opinion, it's a must-have tool. Especially for simple things like this. I've got the panel glued on the bottom, and the next part to go in is what I would call a dust shelf. And this is the very bottom, actually, of the hood part. And once again, I'm not going to use any glue on this. I'm just going to use 2-inch screws to fasten it in place. I got to try to move this out away from the wall. Prior to this, I gave the interior here 2 coats of water-based polyurethane just to make it so that the dust won't stick. I also want to do the rest of the unit in clear polyurethane, so this will be easier to do now that there's no saw in the way or shelves or anything like that. All right, what's happening here is the back of mine sticks out an extra 2 inches because this saw that I'm using is huge and it takes up this much space to be able to use its full capacity. I designed this cabinet specifically to use the tilt function, the compound tilt function on the Hitachi saw that I've got, as well as the swivel part too. So I need this extra space at the back here. So I've got to attach these pieces that I cut out, and I drilled counter bores for the screws, and they'll just get screwed on, no glue. Okay, the next thing to do is to get the top on. That's one piece that goes from end to end. Okay, like the rest of it, this just gets screwed on. It's be a lot more stiffer now than it was before. With the addition of the top and the back, really consolidates it. Okay, I've only got 2 things left to do to make the cabinet functional, and that's to add the shelf for the saw itself and the side tables, the wings, that will support the stock on either side. I'm doing the shelf in 2 layers. I'm going to do the bottom one first. I've already put it in place, and I put the divider that I made for the middle here under this end, and then I cut another one that's scrap actually to go up on the other end to hold it level across. Now the height of this divider is important. What you want to wind up with here is when you put the other layer on here, that it be the height of your saw from here down to the top of the shelf. Has to match that. I've got both ends of this first layer of shelf screwed in, and I've positioned the divider here in the middle where it's supposed to go. I'm just going to take my little square here and check. See the square looks pretty good. It doesn't really need to be because this opening here is just for access underneath to this shelf to clean it out. I anticipate that there will be a lot of dust fall in here, and I figure the easiest way is just to reach in with a whisk broom and sweep it out into a garbage bucket right there. My old one had a drawer that would slide out that the dust fell into, and that really wasn't that much more convenient actually than I anticipate that this will be. Because I wanted the drawer to fit in there really nice and tight, it was often difficult to get out, so that was a bit of a deterrent to cleaning it out. Okay, I just screwed that on, 2 2-inch screws, nothing from the bottom because it really doesn't need it. I'm going to put the other shelf on, again, no glue, just screws. I'm going to put it in place. On top of the other one, make sure it's lined up, and then I'll drive screws down into the one below. And then just a couple more 2-inch ones from each end. And now with that shelf done, I can finally bring the saw back into the shop and set up, at least temporarily, until I get the wings made. Oh man, this is heavy. Oh. What I've got to do now is I've got to spend a few minutes swinging this around, tilting it to find the ideal location for it here on the thing. I don't want to just say the center and then bolt it down type thing, or make my wings to fit and then find that, you know, if I tilt it this way, that it won't go all the way in, or tilt it the other way and it won't go all the way in. Okay, well, as it turns out, it can be exactly centered in here. You actually need more room on this side than you do on this side, especially because this will not go full 45 down and full 45 this way. It'll only go to about 30 degrees tilt. So that leaves quite a bit on that side. I don't know why I didn't see that in the beginning. I could have made my hood maybe 4 inches smaller this way, but really not a big deal. I'm going to go ahead and screw it down in the back. I still have to add a piece to the front here of solid wood to build it out to fully support the front of the saw, and to bolt it over in this location because the hole is actually off the shelf, while this one up here still is. These 2 screws are just temporary. I just want to get the saw so it doesn't move while I get the wings made. Put in position, and I can take the saw out again because I want to finish this shelf with clear polyurethane. Here I've got the 2 pieces that I just cut the length, and these are for the wings that support the material on either side. What I want to do with these, I want to add a piece of solid wood to each edge to make them wider, also to make the edge more durable. I've got a stop block system that clamps right onto these, and I want it to clamp onto solid wood rather than plywood. I've got a piece of construction grade lumber here that I'm going to cut to 48 inches long because I want it to, first of all, put on the edge of these, and I also want a piece to go along the nose here underneath the saw on that shelf. Set my saw to 90, and I get to try out the vacuum system again. Set my saw to 1 1/8. I'll tighten the fence. I'm going to cut strips off this that are 1 inch thick. That's what I'm shooting for. The wing needs pieces that are 1 inch wide, and that piece down there needs a piece that's 1 inch thick by 1 1/2 inch tall. Now this 2x8 has been sitting in my shop for months, and it's really dry, and that's for what you need to do if you're going to use this type of lumber. Even though they say it's kiln dried from, you know, the home center, kiln drying only means that they've removed the bulk of the moisture from the wood. Now, if it's sitting in the store or in the home center for, you know, a month or 2, a lot more of the moisture comes out. So it might be more dry, especially the bigger pieces. They tend to stay around a lot longer. 2x12 will probably be the most dry ones you'll find, especially ones that are 16 feet long. And that's a really good way to get low-cost solid wood lumber here in North America anyway. Okay, I've got all the parts planed smooth. I plane these ones down to the same thickness as the plywood of the wings exactly. So when I put those on, all I'll need to do is give it a light sanding by hand, and that should bring it down nice and flush. I've got one other thing I need to do with 2 of these before I attach them to the wings, and that's to cut a very shallow rabbet here, and that's to receive this peel and stick measuring tape, and that will fit down inside that rabbet. I don't want it to stick up proud of the surface to get scratched up or interfere with the material that's being cut. After that, I got those put on. I used a spline actually that I cut on the table saw that lined up the surface perfectly, and then I just used glue and clamps to hold it together. I didn't want to put any nails or screws in this. I did the same here on the front of the shelf. That piece I cut, I actually put a couple of screws in the middle after I glued it on, and then I clamped it at the ends. Then I gave the shelf down here, plus the nosing, a couple of coats of water-based polyurethane. I also did the side wings, 2 coats, even on the back as well. Then I lifted the saw back up on the thing and lined it up where it needs to go and screwed it down. I edge banded the front of the cabinet here. All the places where the plywood was showing, I just covered it with this thin veneer. I've got a video on that, a separate video, and a link in the description also to that goes over that in a little bit more detail. Before I can put the side tables on, I need to get these fillers put in on either side. I'm going to hold them back from the front by about a 1/4 inch. Really doesn't matter. What they do is they keep the dust in here and not coming out here. And to attach it, I'm just going to drive a screw in through the end. Once again, I'm just using screws here. I'm not using any glue. These side tables line up so that they're 1 inch past the face of the base cabinet here. Just going to measure that. And then I can get a clamp on it to hold it in place so that it doesn't move while I get a couple of 1 1/4 inch screws up into it from underneath. Once again, I'm not gluing the side table down. I'm just using screws to hold it in place, just in case I want to change something in the future. Both side tables are on. Now I can get the peel and stick tape put on. The problem is, of course, that you can't run it up onto the saw because it'll just peel off or get in the way. So you have to start somewhere. And I'm going to start as close to the end as I possibly can. But what I've done is I've cut a piece of plywood here to 12 inches long. I'm going to run that right up tight to the blade and hold that there. What I'm looking for here is for the tape to be the actual dimensions of the parts that I want to cut. Usually you can offset the tape whatever amount you want because there'll be a pointer that points to it. But in my case, I want it to be as close as possible to that so that I can just eyeball cut sometimes. Just take them up, put them in place, line them up with the mark on the tape, and make the cut. I'm gonna obviously have to cut some off the end. It needs to start at that mark at 12, so I can come back to around 11 1/4 and cut that right off. I'll just use a pair of scissors for that. So I've got that end clamped on the 12-inch mark, and I'm just gonna spool it out to the end here and cut it off. This is a right to left reading tape, and the one on the other side will be opposite so that I get correct readings both sides. Then I can peel off the backing and stick it down inside that rabbet that I cut the last time. Now I can do the same thing on the other end over here. I've already cut the tape to the right length. Just peel it off, stick it on. Make sure there's nothing in the track where it goes. All right, with this setup, I've got nearly 48 inches on either side, which is plenty for me for this kind of thing. Usually when you're cutting something to an exact dimension over and over again where you need a stop block, it's going to be 48 inches or less. So this is good for that. Also, you know, when the stock goes down and lines up, it doesn't cover the tape. You can still see clearly the tape by looking over it like this. And if you need a piece that's approximate length, but still pretty accurate, just line it up with the mark on the tape and then make your cut. Anyway, what I've got here are the 2 tip-out bins that I had in my last chop saw station that hold the saw blades that I have or use most often. This is actually a great system. I really like the way the blades go in there, vertical like that, sitting in slots. There's enough space in between the slots to get my fingers in and grasp the blade firmly. The last thing you want to do is take one of these out and drop it on the concrete floor. So I need a place that I can put all of these blades and just pull out, you know, like a drawer, and just pull it out and grab whatever blade I need whenever I need it. I also want to make storage space for my dado blade set. Previous to this, I made this wall-mounted rack right here. It's convenient, but it does get covered with dust and it's taking up valuable wall space that could otherwise be used for something else. I worked out a bit of a plan and SketchUp on how I want the drawer to be, at least for the blades. I'm not sure about the dado set yet. I figure I'll do that after I get the blade part sorted out. And I'm going to be building it from this 3/4 inch plywood here. I really want strong plywood for this because it's going to have a lot of weight in there, first of all. And like I said before, it's not a full box. It's just more or less a frame and then a subframe that carries the blades plus some more stuff. So it really has to be strong. Okay, well, I need the sides that go in to be 22 inches long. That's the length of the drawer slide. Not really much point making it longer than that. And this is where the, the tape being the right, measurement comes in. All I got to do is slide it up, line it up with the 22 inch mark, and make my cut. For the ones that go across the front for the frame, I need to get a measurement for those. I know that the inside of my opening here is 22 5/8, so I'll just put that on the outside of my 2 pieces of plywood. I'm doing it like this because plywood is very rarely exactly 3/4 of an inch, or even a measurement that you can easily, work with. So this makes it a lot faster and easier. I just clamp the 2 pieces together with my fingers and hold the tape at the measurement, and then I can get the measurement on the inside. And it looks like that's 21 3/16. These are the 2 sides that I cut earlier. I just cut the front and the back, and here's one of those. I'm going to put it in place here because I want to make sure that they're the right measurement. I'll measure across, and I can see immediately that I didn't deduct the 1 inch for the drawer slide, so I'm going to have to make these 1 inch shorter. Well, I got that mistake fixed. I'm going to be using just butt joints and glue and screws to put it together. I'm just going to drill the hole first before I put any glue in the joint, and that'll keep it from slipping around all over the place. You see where that little piece broke out in the front there? One way to avoid that is to drill countersinks. The other way is to move further in and drill in on an angle. That way you're not so close to the edge and you're less likely to pop that piece out. I've got the outside frame assembled, and I need a couple of pieces to go in between to carry the saw blades. They're going to have notches cut in them. And whenever possible, I like to measure, rather than using a tape, I'll take the piece that I'm going to cut and put it right in the opening and make a mark on it. And that way I know for sure that it's in there, and that way I really can't mess up like I did with the other thing there. Before I can put these in, I've got to cut slots in them, just like I did with the other ones there. There's lots of different ways you could overcomplicate this, but what I'm going to use is my mini table saw sled, and I've just marked lines on the front of the piece here, spaced 1 inch apart, and I'm going to make saw cuts that are a little bit thicker than 1/8 of an inch. I found with the other one there that the blades fit in there better when they're a little bit more than the thickness of the blade. With no glue and 1 screw in each end, these can twist. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bridge to the middle here. And this one I will glue in. I just want to make sure that it's in between the slots that I cut. I've got space for 20 blades in the part I just did. I've been thinking about the dado set, and there are 5 main components. That's the outside blade parts and the chippers. And they'll all fit in a similar arrangement, except I'm going to put it sideways. I'm going to fit it in here. To hold the shims in the same way as that, I'm going to actually go across again with 2 pieces. I will have 4 slots to hold the shims upright, so I can just pluck them out as I need them. After I finish cutting these, I glued them onto the outside ones and let it dry. Now it's ready to put in. The idea is it'll slip in here so that the dado blades will stack up against this end over here. And I want to move it over as close to the end here as I can. All right, so I've got the drawer slides installed. I tried to film that, but I was dropping too many screws. It's too tight a spot. I would have to censor out too many swear words for the sensitive audience. That is just not worth it. I like it when everything's neatly laid out like this, and all I need to do is open the drawer and grab what I need, and then when I'm done with it, I can put it exactly back where it needs to go. Same thing with the blades. Like I say, I've got 20 slots here. I don't think I have 20 blades, so I've got more than enough, which is a good thing. I'm getting ready to start on the end cabinet, the upper end cabinet on that end of the chop saw station. Yesterday I came out and I made the door to cover this end cabinet, and I'll quickly run through how I did that. This is 3/4 inch maple like the rest of the cabinet, and what I want to get from this are the door fronts for the two upper end cabinets that I made earlier. So I cut it off to 27.5 inches, and that's the rough length. And then I trimmed it down to final size on the table side. This is generally the way I like to do it. I never try to cut full sheets on the table saw. After I got the door panel cut to size, I take the time to edge band it all the way around. And if you'd like more detail on how I did that, there's a link in the description to a video I made specifically about that. I'm going to be using hinges that I'm recycling from my old kitchen cabinets. And here I'm just laying out the whole locations, 3 inches down from the top of the door and 15/16 in from the edge. These are pretty good hinges, and they just clip to the mounting plate inside the cabinet. And then I can adjust the hinges to make the door line up with the cabinet. And then some sanding to clean up the edges and the face before giving it a coat of water-based polyurethane. Rather than a handle, I just routed a finger groove on the edge before giving the door the second coat of polyurethane. I'm not sure if it makes much of a difference, but I put some weather stripping tape around the opening for the door to close against. The idea is that may block some of the sound from the vacuum cleaner. Okay, so I got the vacuum in that one over there. That's completely used up. This one over here, I want to do something different with it. I don't want to have a cabinet, like a cupboard with a door and shelves inside there. The problem with shelves is that, you know, stuff gets stuck in the back there. It gets all cluttered up, and you really only can use the first 2 or 3 inches of the shelf, actually, unless you're putting bigger stuff in there. So it's really limited. The other option is to make drawers, but I don't like drawers at this height. I think it's too awkward to pull them out and try to, you know, crane your neck in over or reach into them. So I've got a different idea, and it's kind of like a drawer, except it's vertical and it will slide out. It will be a panel, actually, kind of like a tool wall, a mini tool wall on drawer slides that slides out, and then you can put whatever you want right onto that panel and a front on it and slide it back in. So I'm going to measure this up, and I got 25.5 high, and it's 16 3/4 inches deep. So the panel will be 25 inches tall and 16 inches deep. All right, so this is what I mean right here. Gone ahead and put this one in already, and just pull straight out like that. And the idea is that whatever you're going to access will be mounted on the board here. Could be used, you know, just the same way as a tool wall would, with tool holders on here. Or it could have bins on here for screws or whatever you want to put there. I want to put 3 of these in this space though. 1 here and 1 in here and 1 in the middle roughly. I want one of these to be thinner because I want one of these to have the router bits that I use mounted on it, because this space down under here eventually will hold my new router table. Well, I decided to make this panel right here the one for my router bits, so I'm going to space the divider that I need to mount the next one on about 5 inches away from that. That'll give me lots of depth there to build a rack to put the router bits on. And the divider itself are just a couple of pieces of 3/4 inch plywood that I'm not going to glue down. I'm just going to screw in place. I've drilled holes down through for the screws. And the reason why I don't want to glue it is in case I want to change this at some point in the future. All I need to do is undo the screws and make the change without, you know, having to smash everything up. I'm using 16-inch full extension drawer slides, and I've broken 2 down, and I'm going to attach this part to the top of the panel and the other one to the bottom of the panel with 1/2-inch screws. To mount this side of the slide, I've cut spacer blocks that lift it up off the bottom. I'm just going to hold it in place here, drill a couple of holes, and then drive in the screws. Now that I got the bottom one attached, I can just put it in on the bottom. And that way I can line up the top side just by holding it in place, putting a clamp on temporarily until I get a screw in. Well, I went ahead and I put the last one in. And now what I need to do is make the fronts for each one. This one is the narrowest one. That'll be 6.5 inches. I got to take the other piece of plywood that I cut off in the beginning and rip that to 6.5. Then the other 2 will be equal size. I think it's 8 3/4. Now it's kind of boring, but I got to do it. I'm going to edge band all 3 panels on all 4 edges before I put them on. So I'll be right back. All right, I've got them all edge banded and I've got them lined up here and across the front. And what I'm going to do is attach them to the panel underneath. And the way I'm going to do that is just with screws, actually, driven right through the face and into the edge of the 1/2-inch plywood. You're probably saying, wow, screws, that's not going to look very good. But you won't be able to see the screws because that's where I'm going to put the handle, actually. It's going to cover those screws right over. Okay, well, I've got all the fronts put on, and I'm putting the handles on. I've already got 2 put on. Little tricky putting the fronts on, mainly because of the plywood I use is 1/2-inch thick. If I had my time back, I would have used 3/4. Would have been more area for the front to attach to. Not only that, the 3/4 would probably stay flatter. This plywood is not known for staying flat. So it's kind of all over the place. Just going to put this in here. I've already got marks put on there, line it up with. And then rather than clamp it, I'm just going to drive in a couple of pins, one at the top and one at the bottom. So anyway, I made a new rack, and here it is. And I'll quickly go through what I did to make it. So the first thing that I did was to cut a piece of 1/2-inch plywood to the right size to use for the rack. Then I figured out what I think will be the ideal spacing for the bits. I'm basing this on my previous experience and my other cabinet. And then rather than drawing out lines on the plywood, I made a series of very shallow cuts on the table saw in a grid pattern, and then I could use that grid pattern to drill the holes. Here I'm using a scrap piece of plywood as a guide for the 1/4-inch holes. I'm using a regular twist drill for this, so this will keep the bits centered and also prevent chip out on the surface. I drilled 88 holes for the 1/4-inch bits. Then I drilled 55 freehand with the 1/2-inch Forstner bit. The Forstner bit cuts a cleaner hole but clogs up more easily, so it's slow going. To make it easier to insert the bits, I chamfered the edge of each hole, and I'm running the drill backwards to keep the bit from chattering too much in the hole. And then I can sand the panel, and that gets rid of any dirt that might be on the surface or any burrs from drilling the holes. To space the rack away from the panel, I cut pieces of 1/2-inch plywood. Then I glued and nailed those on with 5/8-inch brads. I also want to mount the wrenches and the other collets I have on here, and figured I'd keep it simple with just screws to hang them from and cheap magnets just to keep them in place and stop them from swinging back and forth. The magnets drop into 1/2-inch counterbores, and I'm using some fast set epoxy to hold them in there. And then it's just to drill the pilot holes and drive in the screws that the wrenches will hang from. To mount the collets, I'm using 1/2-inch dowels and a 1/4-inch bolt. And these just get glued into holes drilled in between the two bigger wrenches. I drilled the holes for the 1/4-inch bits slightly oversized, but the 1/2-inch holes were still a bit too tight, so I made a quick and dirty sanding drum from a glue stick and a strip of sandpaper, and I chucked that in the drill and used that to remount the holes. To keep it looking clean, I brushed down 1 coat of water-based polyurethane, and when that dried, I lightly sanded it and gave it a 2nd coat. And so the idea is that it just mounts on the panel right inside the drawer like that. So I've got the drawer taken out, and I'm just going to take the panel, put it in place up flush with the top here, and get a clamp on it so it won't move. And then I'm just going to drill pilot holes through and drive 1 1/4-inch screws in to fix it onto the panel. I'm screwing this on from the back, but it can be just as easily screwed on from the front. It's just, I think this is a little bit easier, and I don't want to see the screws in the front. So now that I've got it fastened, I can slide it back in. And that's the beauty of this system. All you need to do is take it out and put it back in when you need to, if you need to make any changes. After I finished the one for the router bits, I went on to make the other 2. And together, these make up a lot of useful storage for items that I use frequently. Now, I built this miter saw station 2 years ago, and I've used it virtually every day since then. And I've also added on to it and improved its functionality over that time. And if you want to see all of the projects related to this, there's a link in the description that'll take you to an article that includes all of those videos. Also, if you're interested in building one of these for yourself, there's a basic plan available, and a link to that is also in the description.